morning, television neighbors. You know, the hardest part about vlogging while driving is reading the teleprompter. I'm just kidding. I don't have a teleprompter. That would be unsafe. So the topic for the day, one of the topics I want to do coming up here is I'd like to talk about email security and also IM security. But I don't think I'm going to talk about that today, because when I told my wife what I was thinking about that as a topic, she just made a frowny face. So instead, I'm going to talk about an app that's near and dear to my heart. In fact, I came up with it's the #1 app on my list of most powerful but least used software applications. So it's it's an app that, and it's also available to more people. So it's like the most powerful software that everyone has access to, but no one uses. And that's, I don't know what my #2 and #3 are, but I mean it's such a powerful application that a list like that I felt needed to be created just so it could be the #1 item. And that application is OneNote. I just realized, I was talking to someone about the wonders of OneNote and what you can accomplish with it, and I realized that the very first time I started using it was in 2003 while I was a student, and I was going to school, and I had a whole bunch of notes to take, and I really wanted to use a laptop, just a normal laptop. I'd tried using a PDA, which is what they called a smartphone before it had phone capability. It was a personal digital assistant. My first one of those was a Palm Pilot, but earlier I'd been able to play with Apple had one. They called the Newton, and Newton was a really cool device. And one of the things that the Newton tried to do, and this is one of the reasons Apple kind of ruined the market for a while for pen input devices, because a lot of people who remembered the Newton remembered that what the Newton tried to do was, in a handheld form factor, it tried to actually convert anyone's handwriting. This is like in 1995 or probably 1995 or so. They were trying to, in people's hands, actually convert their handwriting into text, and then just use the regular computer operating system to just deal with everything in text. So like you do a lot of heavy processing on the front end, and then it's in text, and then you might also have an overlay of an image of the text that was saved or something. But for the most part, you can do anything you want with it as long as you're accurate. Well, you could train it, and it was an amazing device for its day, but it just didn't quite live up to the promise, and it's one of Apple's failed products. And because they kind of sold that as the way to go, recognizing the text, that was the holy grail, then pretty much anything that came afterward that didn't recognize the text wasn't very popular. And even today, there are all these solutions that don't involve recognizing the text up front. Like, I've seen paper-based ones where you can just get, it's a special pen is really the crux of the device, and then you use paper with the special microscopic dot pattern on it that's hard to see, just with the naked eye. I mean, if you look really close, you can see there's a little texture to it. But as you write, the pen notices where the paper is, and it actually keeps a log of where all your pen strokes are. And then after a while, you fill up the data on the pen, and you have to synchronize it. And that's when a bunch of processing happens on the PC, where you have a lot more processing power to do that kind of stuff. But very few people, there are people who were trying it mobile, and it just wasn't working. And it even wasn't too great, back then, even on a computer. So anyway, people wanted pen input just because there are all kinds of studies that show that it's much more natural. I've heard of a study that said that, you know, people who take notes with a pen in a meeting, even if it's an electronic pen, they have better recall, and that may be because a lot of people grew up taking notes with a pen, and so they're kind of going back to what their brain learned when they were very young, and when they were in a hyper learning mode, just picking up all kinds of stuff left and right. And those results could change as the study is repeated with people who grew up learning with a keyboard. But anyway, this is 2003. I was trying to take notes on a PDA with a keyboard and just type everything in, and that worked pretty well, and I still had to keep a pad and paper, and the main reason was a lot of the subjects I was taking, they involved advanced mathematics and symbols and stuff that you can represent them with a keyboard, but there's a lot of opportunity for error, and the instructor's just writing really fast and everything, so you really just need to be able to, you know, mimic exactly what the instructor's doing in your notes, you know, to you know, if you see an important equation, or if you see you know, integrals and stuff like that, you need to just be able to write it down and not screw around with trying to convert it into some kind of typewritten format. So I got a thing that was brand new at the time. It was called a tablet PC. It ran on Windows XP Tablet PC Edition, and it was the Toshiba Satellite R15. And you can tell how important this was to me, because I don't, you know, there are a lot of devices that I would need to go and look up the part numbers after 15 years, and this, you know, I remember these right off the bat. Now, the interesting thing, I told you earlier that Apple tried the approach of just recognizing all the handwriting into text at first. Well, the Microsoft approach was that that's too hard, and technology and processing power and computer science wasn't up to the task at that point. So what they did is they just added a type of input, you know, much as we have text, they added ink as an input type. And that has stayed in Windows for 15 years, okay? It's still there today. If you have a Windows 10 device, it's got ink built in, even if you don't have a touch screen or a stylus or anything. So it's really interesting to me that it's been around for so long. And so 15 years ago, the way I was using it is there was a very new app. It was called OneNote. And it was part of Office, so you had to have Office, which was very expensive, but I got a student discount on it through my university. And you would go and you'd get Office, and then you could, I think, download OneNote, or maybe it was available on a CD-ROM or something to install. And you put it on there, and what made it amazing is you could actually go and sit. I started sitting in the front row of all of my lectures, which is actually a pretty good idea. I know none of the cool kids do it in electrical engineering, where, I mean, some would say there are no cool kids. I think all electrical engineers are cool. But they go in, and you sit down in the front row, and hopefully near a power outlet, because, you know, back then battery life was it left some to be desired. In fact, I ordered it with a second battery, though I didn't really end up carrying around the second battery much, because I could just, you know, my entire schedule revolved around doing everything I needed to do someplace where there was a secure location where I could plug in my laptop and either work on it or you know, just charge it while I ate or something like that. So yeah, life revolved around power outlets. But I'd go and I'd sit up front, and I would open up OneNote, and even though Windows XP could be a little bit laggy as far as operating systems go and get bogged down, as you know, especially as machine resources dwindled, as you got a lot of files on there and stuff like that, the pen input was always just spot on. I think Wacom made or Wacom, I don't know how you pronounce it, they made the technology for it. So here, you know, I knew people with a Mac, and it was probably a different grade of Wacom tablet. It probably wasn't the top of the line one, that Mac users were getting and stuff like that. But you know, these people, they were going out and getting a Wacom tablet and everything, and here I had one with me all the time. Now, we didn't have touch screens back then, so if you wanted to interact with it, you had to use the pen. But still, that's when really touch computing started coming into its own. And I think it was more after the Windows Phone that they started making the buttons larger, and you know, so on-screen buttons larger, and spacing out links and stuff to make them easier for finger touch. But they started thinking about, like, how are people going to interact with this with a pen? And so one of the things you could do is you could just, any text box, you could like tap on it and it'd pop open a handwriting window, and you could handwrite right in there, and it would convert that into text. But it also had a lot of correction tools and predictive tools and stuff to really help the process along. So, and those have gotten only better in the past 15 years. So, anyway, I'd sit down and I would hit record, and you actually had the option. You know, video was huge back then, and webcams were not built in to laptops back then, typically. So, I tried it a couple times. I got a very small video camera for laptops that I could collapse and stick into my laptop bag, and I tried a couple times recording entire lectures. But what you do is you record either audio or video, and when you did that, as you took notes, either typed or handwritten, the audio and video, if there was video, it was synchronized to your notes. And so what that gave you the capability to do for the first time is, as you're, you know, you can go and write stuff down, and let's say I'm in a physics lecture, and all of a sudden the professor says something about jelly beans, and so I write down jelly beans, and it's within context of the lecture, of course. And so then I go, like 3 months later, I'm studying for the final or whatever, and I'm like, what is, you know, why did the physics lecturer write down jelly beans? And he's, and so a lot of people, if they just had it written down in paper notes, then they just wonder, well, geez, why did that happen? And if it seemed to be especially, you know, pertinent to the material, then they might have to go find someone else who was in the class. And he's like, hey, do you remember if like 3 months ago we were, you know, in this class, and, you know, maybe it was even a previous quarter or something like that. And do you remember when the instructor was talking about jelly beans? You know, I'm just trying to remember that or whatever. Well, you don't have that problem with OneNote. You just go and you tap it, and it automatically skips to about 5 seconds before the word was, you know, before you took the note. So the, you know, ideally you wrote it down within 5 seconds of hearing it, which seems to be reasonable. And it would just start playing back the lecture from that point, and you could just skip forward and back, and as you're playing it back, it's highlighting the things that you wrote. So it was just such a rich experience. Also, not a lot of people were taking handwritten notes at that time, so there were a lot of legacy rules about open notes. And I haven't been to college in a while, or talked with anyone about it. I should ask some of my current college student friends about open note policies. But I remember, like, I would say, hey, this is my notebook, and I have all the notes for the course in it. I hand wrote them in here myself. May I use this on the open note test? And even though the device did have internet access and stuff like that, people, like the instructors, they just, like, they couldn't think of a reason to object. And also, they were techie instructors. I mean, if there were a cheat sheet or something, someone could have had that in their paper notes, so it didn't really expose a lot. It did expose the possibility of external help, but I told them I could, like, turn off Wi-Fi or whatever, and they trusted me, and I never did any of that. So they just let me use OneNote. So what that did is that meant that on the topic at hand, I didn't just have the notes from that one class, but I had like, I'd take course packets that were provided to us as stacks of paper, and I would go and I'd take them over to the computer lab where they had an auto sheet feeder, and I would sit there and I'd do stuff while the auto sheet feeder scanned in like hundreds and hundreds of pages of like photocopied documents. And the neat thing is, when you import all these images into OneNote, it used optical character recognition, so it made everything searchable. Or let's say I was walking down the hallway and I saw that a meeting was going to take place that I wanted to attend. Well, a lot of other people, they had to open up their day timer and all this. I could just take a picture of it with my phone, and then I could, you know, import that image, and then the text within the image would become searchable. So I just immediately found that incredibly useful. And you know, one of the things that's weird to me is, it dawned on me, is like, I've been doing this stuff every day for like 15 years, and the vast majority of people don't even know what OneNote is. If they do, they haven't used it. I mean, I just can't, like, there's so much life that I have lived because I knew about OneNote and could organize my life and keep track of things and not forget them and not waste time going back and recollecting information, or just, I forgot it, just forget about it, move on. I mean, it's just such a transparent fixture that it's just seamless. I don't even remember nowadays that I'm using it. So, you know, I still, you know, everywhere I've worked, I've tried to get, well, it kind of, when you use it that much and that effectively, anytime that you encounter people that you need to work with who don't use OneNote, it's like a huge vacuum. There's like a huge thing missing. There's all this convenience that's just gone. It's like a power outage. You know, you don't have to worry about light or heat or fans or anything like that. And then all of a sudden the power goes out and you can't do, you know, you can't do half the stuff you did before. And that's how I feel. And you know, it's really weird because, like, everywhere I've gone in the 15 years since then, every team I've been on, almost never does anyone use OneNote at all when I enter the team. And by the end, they can't afford not to use OneNote because I've made so many notes myself, but then other people have contributed. And so it kind of becomes, even if they had some means of taking notes as a team earlier, it really ends up, you know, taking over. And that's, I think that's one of the things that people don't like about OneNote, is that, you know, when they see it coming, they know their system is not as robust and capable. A lot of people, that's a weird thing. Anytime you bring something to someone and say, hey, we should try and use this, then invariably someone seems to turn around and go, oh, well, why don't we just use this instead? It's the same thing. And the number one thing that I've heard that about is Evernote. And Evernote, I think, came around 5 years after OneNote was released. OneNote also, so it was like 5 years more mature or so, maybe 3. But it was much more mature. And Evernote, it had base functionality, but to get a lot of the things like OCRing images and stuff that came with OneNote, which came free with Office, which everyone had Office back then. But if you wanted these capabilities, you had to pay. So you'd have to buy Office, and then you'd have to buy Evernote. Later on, there were some Evernote converters, and I really don't know a lot of people who are still using Evernote. I don't know what happened to it. And one of the things I think may have happened to it is I don't know, a couple years ago, I think, when they made a really robust iOS version, it could be like, it's under 5 years ago, I think, they went and they made OneNote free on all devices. So you just go to, I think, just do a search for OneNote, Microsoft's official thing, or just do a search for OneNote download. And you can just go and you can, any platform it's on, which is all of them in some form, then you can get it for free. So there's a web version, and there's also mobile versions for Android and iOS and Windows Phone, and then there's Windows 10 version and a Mac version. So there are all these versions for whatever device you're on, and the neat thing about that is it's wherever you go. So, you know, you're never without it. So yeah, it costs nothing to use the full feature set. There are a couple of additional apps that you might want to consider getting, there's one called Office Lens. That's a free app as well, and it just takes the process of importing, they improve on the process of importing images. And once again, I say, hey, you should try Office Lens, and all these people say, oh, I just used the such and such for that, and then I'm like, oh, interesting, I'll go check it out. And I look like there's one there, I don't know, I don't remember the names of them because I checked them out and I found that they were just like, okay, if this person thinks that this is the same thing as Office Lens, then they don't know what Office Lens is. And really, Office Lens is super simple. You have anything that is skewed because you're like not directly in front of it. For example, an architect could use it to photograph the side of a building. So I'm looking at this big building and it's skewed. It's not directly, like parts of it are face on to me, but other parts of it aren't. So what if I wanted to stitch these together or whatever? You might want to rely on stitching algorithms for that ideally, but if you want to just do it really quick, then you can just take a picture of it with OneNote or with Office Lens, and it will actually give you these little boundaries to put on the corners of the building, and then it will de-skew the building and make it look as if you were standing right in front of it. This is great if you're at a museum or something and you just see an interesting picture or diagram or some text that you want to capture. A lot of times I'm out on a nature hike and there's a little blurb, but like the sun's going down and I want to read it, but I want to keep going. So I'll just pull out my phone, I'll take a picture of the little thing, and I don't have to be standing right in front of it. Another great time to use Office Lens with OneNote is if you go to a technology conference or anywhere where someone's using a projector to display slides. You can sit there with Office Lens open, and you can be off in the corner and be taking pictures with it, and then you're going to end up with shots that, they're a little lower quality than if you had the actual slide deck, so that's still preferable. But a lot of places, people don't make the slide decks available, so you kind of got to grab it real quick while you can. Another neat thing about Office Lens is if you've already taken pictures like that, like my family, they just take pictures with a regular camera even though they have Office Lens installed because they forget they have it. But if you take a picture like that, then you can import it into Office Lens later and you can de-skew it. So that's nice because sometimes you have pictures that you might have taken many, many years ago, or someone might have taken many years ago, and you want to de-skew it for some reason. And so I do that as well. So anyway, I just wanted to put in a pitch for OneNote. The Windows 10 version, which is free in the Windows Store, that I've been using that the other day, and it's really grown up. Normally I use the desktop version, but I think there's some kind of, I may have a corrupted cache due to some extremely complex maneuvering I did around the new year, and I need to figure that out. But my desktop version was crashing, and the Windows 10 app version was stable while I was taking notes in a meeting yesterday. And also I really liked the pen animations. I was using a 0.5 tip. I think it's supposed to be 0.5 millimeter, but it must be zoomed in because it seemed a little thicker than that. But I was using like a blue pen, and it was almost like painting with watercolor, but not in an annoying way. It was just neat because there was like this stroke animation. So as you would paint the letters you're writing, then they would kind of start out wider and then almost like dry before your eyes, we're talking like a quarter second, but just seeing the process unfold in front of you, it's just a really neat experience. And let's see what else. Oh yeah, they have some really fun stuff in that version that I haven't seen in the desktop version yet. They have this like rainbow glitter pen, and I know that I think there's Jen Microsoft, I think. She's one of the people on the team that, let's see, there's the Windows Insider team. And she's always like doing little doodles, I think, with the glitter pen. She really likes that. So I think I need to show it to my daughter because she doesn't mess with it enough. Now, I was talking to someone, they have a Surface RT, and the Surface RT doesn't use the same Wacom technology. It doesn't really support a stylus. It might work with like an iOS stylus, one of those that's got kind of like the smushy rubber nib on it. And those are very common now, so that's good. So you could probably use the OneNote app there, but it doesn't support the desktop app version, and the OneNote app version that's on RT might not be updated to the fullest, full Windows 10 version, because I know that there are some functionality that is unlocked by Windows 10. So there may be some limited functionality there that might not be the best experience available, but it still should work if you want to take notes with that. And I'm not sure if that version supports audio recording. I know that there were some things like that in the early versions that didn't that didn't make it into the mobile and the store app. So anyway, those are a couple things to be on the lookout for. If you have any questions about OneNote, I actually have a presentation that I sometimes give at places where I work to help introduce people to the features of OneNote. So maybe I'll record that sometime as a vlog entry, because essentially what I do is I go through all of the file menu at the top of OneNote, and I just talk about my experiences with each of those things, how to use them, how they're really useful, especially within the context of a team. So that's going to be it for today. I got to go in and get to work. So hope you all have a good one, and remember to like and subscribe, and of course ask questions, because I know people have a lot of them. So thanks a lot. Bye.